All right, good afternoon, everybody out there. Welcome to our Hydro Station live event where today we're going to be making a water filter together. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so excited that so many of you out there are joining us. I would love to give a shout out or a hello and welcome to our friends at Sweetwater Authority and Otay Water District. These are friends who help support these programs and are help bringing this presentation live to you today. My name is Mrs. Bystrak or Mrs. B, and many of you I have seen out there as we've been doing some different classes. I'm excited to share this opportunity with you. As you see in the pictures here, I have some pictures of me in the Hydro Station classroom. This classroom is a place where 5th grade students from Chula Vista Elementary School District get to come and explore their strengths, their interests, and their passions, all while learning about water and future careers in the water industry as well. Now, I know many of you out there have already started asking questions on our Q&A. You're very curious, wondering what we are going to be doing today. So be sure to ask questions in our Q&A section. We have Mr. Bruder and Mr. Chris Garcia from the Innovation Station. They are moderating that Q&A today. So if you have questions, they can answer those questions back for you. And we'll actually be presenting some of those questions at different parts during our presentation today. Now, I know many of you are coming from lunch, so it's time to wake those brains up a little bit. So I'm going to start off with a little quiz to get your brain thinking, and it's called Guess My Word. So I'm going to give you 5 clues, and as I give you these clues, let's see if you can guess what my word is today, or the word of the day. So this is a precious resource that we should not waste. A precious resource that we should not waste. Any ideas yet? I bet you're thinking. This is something that we always expect when we turn on a faucet. When I turn on that faucet, there's something I'm expecting to come out of there, and I'm hoping it's clean and reliable. And before you use this resource, it must undergo what we call a treatment process to make sure that it's super safe for you and your family. Any ideas yet what we're going to be talking about? Remember, I'm from the Hydro Station. Here, it takes many employees working together to provide a safe and reliable source of this to our community. We're getting closer. I'm sure many of you have started to guess my word. This is a resource that we all need for survival as well. Any thoughts? Well, if you guessed water, you are correct. So my warm-up word of the day today was water, and that's exactly what we are going to be talking about today. Now, water, we get our water from a certain source. There's 4 different sources where we could potentially get our water. So I want to talk to you about this really quick because we see water come from the faucet, but we don't always think about where it originated for. So one way we can get water is we can import water. So we can bring water from other areas through pipelines and vast systems. We can import water and then send it out to our local community. We can also use what we call surface water. So this might be lakes or rivers or streams in our local area or water runoff from our watershed. This is called surface water that we can use. We can also find water underground. So we can find water underground in places that we call aquifers. These are the cracks and spaces in the soil, rock, and sand. So we can pump that water, we can treat it, and we can use it as well. And a final potential source, which we haven't tapped into as much, but it's a huge body of water, is the ocean. So we can find water in the oceans and we can treat it so that it is usable for our consumption. But one thing I want you to think about with water, no matter where your water comes from, it must be treated to ensure that it is safe to use. So on the left-hand side, you see a water treatment plant. On the right-hand side, you also see a water treatment plant, but it's a different kind of filtration process that we call reverse osmosis. So we're going to talk a little bit about these topics today. Now, as we're going through our demonstration today, there's two essential questions I have for you. The first one is, how can we clean water? So how can we get that source water that we just talked about, how can we clean it so we can use it? The other thing I want to ask you is, what materials are most effective when building a water filter? So keep those questions in the back of your mind. Now, I've already started to use some words that are really associated with water and the water industry. So I want to teach you about 3 words that you might hear me saying throughout this presentation. So the first thing is, many of you might be wondering, what is a filter? So a filter is a device for removing unwanted substances. So today we're going to be making a filter, and on your screen you see some samples of either reverse osmosis filters or this filter here called a life straw, which can help clean water as well. Many varieties of filters. We're also going to talk about what treated water is, and that's any type of water that undergoes a process to serve an end use. So for our purposes today, or in a water treatment plant, we want to be able to provide safe, reliable water out to our community. So we take this source water, we put it through a process to clean it, and then you have safe drinking water. And the final thing is, if you hear me talk about a water treatment plant, that's the facility or the location where the water is treated or cleaned before it comes out through our distribution center out to you at your homes and businesses and schools. Now that brings us to our portion where we're going to actually do this live demonstration of working together to build a water filter. So I know that many of you have received a list of materials. So if you look on the screen here, some of you may have them gathered. If you haven't had the opportunity to gather these materials, you can press pause, and you can catch up with us as you gather these materials. So we're going to use these materials for a 2-step process. For the first part, we're going to make and create some contaminated water. And then the second part, we're going to make the filter to actually clean that water. So all these items that you see here are very helpful for our demonstration. Now, if you don't have something in particular, that's okay. We're experimenting today. And if you see alternate materials that you can use, or if you use your own knowledge of what you know about filters, you can add those to your filter as well. So we're going to take a moment and pause as some of you are getting ready, and I'm going to see if Mr. Bruder or Mr. Garcia, if there are any questions out there before we begin demonstrating how to make our filter.
Hey, Mrs. Bystrak. Yeah, we have some great questions out there. We have one from Ben. He's asking, why do we need groundwater?
Why do we need groundwater?
Yes.
Was that the question? So there's different potential water sources that we can tap into. And you saw me show imported water. That means that water comes from another area, which can be quite expensive. So we actually have some water, it's called groundwater here in our area. It's a local source. And so it can be more cost effective, or it could be just another reliable source of water for us to be able to access and use for our community.
Thanks for answering that. And also Zach, one of our viewers, is wondering, is there different types of water filters that exist?
There are many different kinds of water filters. Today we're going to work through one that would kind of parallel or be similar to what we saw in that water treatment plant, that big one that had different types of pools. But you also saw that reverse osmosis plant, which is like our desalination plant. They use what they call reverse osmosis filters, which use a lot of pressure to be able to clean water. So today you're going to see it in a different way, a different type of filter. There are many different kinds of filters.
And one last question, I think you're about to answer this though, is the science behind this. How exactly does the science behind this work?
So we're actually going to go into this right now, as Mr. Bruder said. So we're going to talk a little bit about it, and then after we make our filter, we will kind of recap those ideas as well. And it's nice that you're already thinking about that, which means you're thinking about you're thinking deeply, because we are going to be having a Kahoot. So I'm going to quiz you at the end of this. So you want to be paying attention to the different steps so you can start to understand the science and the special words behind it as well.
Well, we have some more questions, but I think we're ready to dive into the science and build that filter.
Alrighty, sounds good. So I am starting to get my source water. Remember I talked about imported or groundwater, ocean water. We're going to create our own source water right now. So what I'm going to do first is I have my empty bowl, and I'm just going to pour some water that I got from the tap. I'm going to pour that water into the bowl. Now this water is already cleaned and filtered because it came from my tap. It came from my faucet. So I get to be a gross polluter. I get to pollute this water. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to do that. Now the first material I'm going to use to make some pollution into this water, maybe make it like the same conditions as a river or a lake or a stream. I'm going to add some dirt, which I actually grabbed from one of my plants. So I had some potting soil that I grabbed, and I'm going to add that into there. So I'm going to actually put that into my water. And I'm going to grab a spoon. I'm just going to kind of mix it up so you can see this water is now polluted, or it has some different organic material, which when we get water from lakes and streams, our reservoirs, there's lots of different materials in there. So I'm going to go ahead and mix that up. I see some things are starting to settle. If I hold this up to the side, you should be able to see that maybe that water is getting kind of mucky and dirty. Now, something else we can think about as we're polluting this water, we may have people who have maybe left some plastics or trash around. So I'm going to throw some pieces of paper in here, some little chunks just to add that in there to see what happens when we start to pull those things out. All right, so I'm going to add some pollution here. Other things you might find in water, maybe there's some runoff from cars, things like oil and gas that can get in there. So I'm just going to go ahead and mix up, and it looks like my water is pretty polluted or contaminated here. So let's say this is one of our only sources of water, so we have to figure out some way to be able to separate all this material we just added to be able to have it clean for whatever purpose we want to use it for. All right, so we have our water source. The next thing is we need to have our filter. So we're going to create our filter. So I asked you to have at least one plastic bottle. So I have different types of bottles. I have different sizes. You may have different ones at home as well. Now for this next part, it's a little tricky because you're going to use scissors to cut this bottle in half. Now, if you need some help, you can ask a parent for support. I'm going to show you the best way that I know how to cut through this bottle here is I'm going to squeeze towards the middle. So right about the middle, I'm going to squeeze. And I'm going to do a quick cut so that I have a hole. Now that I have some sort of slice there, I'm going to just go ahead and cut my bottle in half. So go ahead with me, go ahead and cut your bottle in half. It helps to take the bottle top off so that you can bend it and move it. All right. So now I've cut my water bottle in half. It's no longer a water bottle. Now what we're going to call this is a basin. So a basin is kind of like a pool where this filtered water is going to trickle into. So I'm going to put this down. I'm going to put the base down. And now I have this top piece, which looks like a funnel when I turn it upside down. So for this first part in building our filter, we're going to go ahead and grab that paper towel. So if you had a paper towel, maybe you have some cotton, maybe you have a coffee filter, you can go ahead and grab those items and you're going to attach one of those to the bottom of the filter. Because as we add our next materials, you are not going to want them to fall out. You're only going to want water to trickle through. So we're going to use either a piece of cloth, a napkin, a paper towel, a filter. Go ahead and put that. You can put it on the bottom of the lid. If you have a rubber band, that is helpful to keep it in place. If you don't have a rubber band, another alternative you can do is you can actually stick this inside. You can stick it inside your bottle, so inside your funnel area. I'm actually, so you are going to be able to see a little bit better, I'm going to put this on the outside and I'm going to put the rubber band so that you can see the different layers when I add some different layers to our filter. All right. Hopefully you're moving along. Again, I'm sure there's some parents out there helping with either rubber bands or cutting. And now I'm going to gently put this into place. Now, before we even filter water from a water treatment plant, there's a couple things that happen in the process before we begin to filter. So we have our filter ready here, but there's a couple things that happen with this water before it even goes into the machines to become filtered. So the first thing we're going to talk about is called coagulation and flocculation. These are pretty big words. If you can try to say them, that'd be awesome. So coagulation and flocculation. And basically what those big words describe is that when we have this water from our source, we don't want to just pour it into the filter because our filter will become clogged. So we need to try to remove some of that material. So the way we do it in some treatment plants is we add a chemical that is called a it coagulates, meaning it brings this material together to make it form larger particles so that we can take it or extract it from the water. So I don't have a chemical today, but I'm going to kind of scoop this together and show you those big clumps. I'm going to try to remove those big clumps. And I see that those paper particles, all that stuff I added, I'm able to clump it together, whether it's through a strainer or we use a chemical that can help these materials coagulate. They create a product that we call flock. So it's this kind of stuff that eventually settles down to the bottom, which brings it to the next process or step. So I'm going to go ahead and scoop a little bit more of this out to help my filter out so it doesn't get clogged. I'm going to go ahead and take that out. Now the next step in the water treatment process is what we call sedimentation. So I have a bowl that has been sitting here for quite some time with the same type of mixture. And you can see the difference that over time, all of that material has started to go down. So we have some cleaner water up above, and then down below, all of that sedimentation or all that sediment has gone now to the bottom. So it makes it easier for us to be able to take that water and put it through our filter. Now I'm going to move these here to the side as we begin to build our filter. We're not going to just pour water in right away. We're going to add something that most treatment plants use in their filtration process, and that is some type of sand. So I'm going to add these materials here. I have rocks, and I have gravel, and I also have sand. Now, the way our water is going to work is it's going to start from the top and it's going to trickle down to the bottom. So when I look at these three materials, the last part that goes through my filter, I want to make sure is the most fine or the smallest because it's going to be coming out here. So when I look at these three materials, I'm looking for the most fine material. And that I noticed is the sand. So I'm going to go ahead and add that sand in. Now our next step, I'm going to pick the next or the medium sized material that I have, and it looks like that is going to be my gravel. So you see now I'm creating different layers in my filter. And my last step, I'm going to add some rocks here so that when the water, it'll kind of slow down the water trickling down to that sand. So now I have 3 layers that I have just added to my filter. So it's ready to be tested. So I wonder how your filters are doing. I'm wondering if there are different types of materials that you use that might work differently or better than mine. Because like our friend asked, are there different kinds of filters? There are many kinds. So there's different ways you can do this. All right, so it looks like I'm going to pour some of my contaminated water into our filter and see how it works. All right. So I'm seeing right now that this is going to take a little bit. I'm starting to see the water going down, and there it is. I am starting to see it become filtered. So if you look at my water at the top here, you can see it was pretty contaminated and dirty. And now it's going through these different porous materials and out through the bottom, hopefully you can see that trickle, is my filtered water. Now, it's going to take some time for your filters to go ahead and process all of that water. But there's one more step in this process. We won't be able to do it here, but it's just a reminder to not drink this water, because even though it's gone through a filter, it doesn't mean that it's free of any bacteria or virus, because our last step in our water treatment is to treat or disinfect this water to make sure that it's perfectly safe for drinking or eating. So for our demonstration purposes today, you can see that this water is more clear, it's been filtered out, we polluted it, and now we are decontaminating it. But there is one more step, which would be disinfection. I'm going to go ahead and stop right there as we switch gears to check on Mr. Bruder and Mr. Garcia and see if we have any questions before we move forward.
Hey, Mrs. Bystrak. Yeah, we have some more questions. We have a question from Christopher. Are some filters better than other filters?
So I believe there are some different pros and cons. Remember, we talked about water treatment, so it depends on the end use. So there are definitely some that may, like for instance, our reverse osmosis filters, those take a lot of energy and power. So that might be one downfall, but they also are able to create some pretty pure water. So there's different pros and cons on these different filters.
So kind of to go back, we have another question from Tanaya. She's wondering, why do we need water filters to begin with?
So why do we need water filters? So could you imagine if your water came out of your faucet, as you see here, all dirty and yucky? You wouldn't just go to a river or a stream, because there's so many different types of materials in there that you don't know about. So you want to make sure you have safe, reliable drinking water. And that's why we go through this water treatment to be able to make sure that our community has safe drinking water. You want to make sure it's safe and clean, because you never know which kind of contaminants are in that water.
And we have one more question from Allison, asking, how is groundwater specifically filtered?
How is groundwater specifically filtered? So that's pretty cool that you're asking, because where our hydro station is located, we're located on what we call a desalination plant. So that water is pumped up from underground, and we use a lot of pressure, apply a lot of pressure through those pipes called reverse osmosis. I'm sorry, not pipes, filters. And that's how the water is cleaned. After it goes through those reverse osmosis trains, then it goes to be disinfected with some chemicals that we have.
Thanks for answering those, Mrs. Bystrak. I know we have some more questions coming in. I think we're ready to move on so that we can learn a little bit more about the steps in the water treatment process.
Okay, all right, sounds great. So what you see on my screen here now are the 4 different steps that we kind of talked about before we are These are some of the steps in the water treatment plant that we work through right now as we were building our water filter. So the first thing we talked about, remember when I was scooping that dirt, that was mimicking our coagulation process or our flocculation process. So basically, that's when we add chemicals to bind those particles together so they can easily be filtered out. And that flocculation is what happens when we coagulate it. That water is mixed slowly. It makes the particles come together to form larger particles so that we can sift them out or take them out before we go through the filtration process. Remember, I also showed you my water, how it started to settle. So that floc goes through what we call the sedimentation process, where it can start to separate on its own using gravity. So that floc will settle to the bottom of the water, and then you'll see that cleaner water towards the top. And that led us to the filtration process, where you just built your filter. And that filtration process is when water is passed through a filter to remove more particles from the water. And the most common type of material that we can find in water treatment plants is usually sand. but not sand alone. We like to try to extract as much as we can so that we don't have our filters being clogged up all the time with all that big organic material. And then that led us to the last step, the reminder why you are not going to be drinking this water. You're just checking for that clarity, is the final step in our water treatment process, which is disinfection, to make sure that all our water is free of any bacteria or viruses. So that was our water treatment in 4 steps, including that filtration process as well. Wow, friends, so hopefully your water is still filtering, and as it's still filtering, that brings us now, I fed you a lot of information. I gave you lots and lots of information about water, the water treatment process, and so now I love to invite you all to come and join us in playing a quick quiz on Kahoot. So to play this Kahoot game, what I'm going to ask you to do is, in a separate window, or maybe you have a separate device, go ahead and join us at www.kahoot.it. Now, when you get to that website or to the Kahoot app, go ahead and enter our game pin, which is 4296457. So I'd love to see you join in the quiz. Let's test your knowledge out. I'm going to give you a moment to do that. And as you do that, I'm going to switch screens to get our game ready. I see some friends are starting to join. I see. Here we come. So let's give us a moment here.
Mrs. Bystrak, while we wait for some friends to join us in the Kahoot game, can we ask you a couple more questions?
Sure. Hope I can answer. You guys are asking me some really scientific questions, so let's see how well I do on this quiz.
We may have to bring some of our attendees to work at the hydro station.
That'd be amazing. I know our friends at Sweetwater Authority and Otay Water District are always looking for great employees.
I think we have some future water experts here. So Michael wants to know, is it possible, how do you filter salt water or ocean water?
So that ocean water and that salt water, we actually have another desalination plant in our local community up near Oceanside area, and they actually do pull that ocean water. So it's pretty much the same process. I believe there's a few more steps. I'm not the expert in this, I'm just telling you from what I know, is that they do use those reverse osmosis filters, as you saw from our desalination facility down here in Chula Vista as well.
Great, thanks. We have another question from Noah. Can you filter rainwater?
Can you filter rainwater? So that rainwater is part of our water cycle. So remember when you saw that surface water, that's that runoff from either like mountains going into rivers and our reservoirs or into our lakes and streams. So that water is actually going down, it's part of our watershed, and that is part of one of the water sources that we can use. It's just a matter of being able to find the source where that rain runoff goes, right? And unfortunately, a lot of that goes off into the ocean, which makes it harder to use as a source again.
And we have one more question, and this is from our friends over at Olympic View, a whole 2nd grade class. Why is it important to filter water?
So why is it important to filter water? So do you remember that yucky water, that water that we contaminated together? It was really dirty. I can't imagine that if after a long day of playing sports, you would be like, I can't wait to drink that dirty, polluted, gross water, right? So one reason is we want to make sure it's clean and safe. It's a matter of our health. If you drink water that has bacteria or viruses in it, or has some different kinds of chemicals or pollution before it's treated, you can get really sick. So it's a matter of us making sure we have a healthy community. So we always want to make sure it's filtered and goes through that water treatment process.
Well, thanks for answering all those questions. We still have some friends joining in, but I think we're ready to go ahead and get started. And for any friends out there still logging into Kahoot, you'll still be able to join in the quiz even if it's after we start. So I think we're ready, Mrs. Bystrak.
All right. Okay, so it looks like we're ready to get started. I am going to start with our first question. Hopefully I covered all this information for you, and I know you guys have amazing minds out there. So let's get this started. This is all about the water treatment process that you just saw or learned about. Here we go. So our first question is, which words describe a potential source of water? Is it imported water? Is it surface water? Is it groundwater? Or is it all of the above? So which words describe places or sources where we can get water that we can clean and treat for your drinking? Let's try again. Which words describe a potential source of water? Is it red triangle imported water? Is it yellow circle surface water? Is it blue diamond groundwater? Or is it green square, all of the above? What were those different sources of water we talked about? We have a couple more seconds. I'm seeing those answers coming in. I'm excited to see how we answered. Let's see if we have been taught well. So I have a little mix here. So I'm going to say here, it is all of the above, but if you answered those other words, those were all potential sources of water. So I guess in a way, you're all correct here as well. Let's go ahead and see. It looks like Focused Cat is in the lead right now with Agile Yak following close behind. Let's go ahead and go to our next question and see what we know. Question number 2. Which word is used to describe a device that removes unwanted substances from water? So we built one today. Which word is used to describe a device that removes unwanted substances from water? Is it flock? Is it filter? Is it funnel? Or is it faucet? So let's reread this one more time. Which word is used to describe a device that removes unwanted substances from water? Is it flock with the red triangle? Is it a filter with the yellow circle? Is it a funnel with the blue diamond? Or is it a faucet with the green square? Couple more seconds. I see those answers pouring in. You see that speed is part of this as well. If you answered filter, which 51 of you did, the answer is filter. That helps us, that is a device that helps us remove unwanted substances from our water. Focused Cat. Oh, looks like Agile Yak has moved up the ranks here. All right, our third question. Which is one of the most commonly used materials in the filtration process? So I mentioned that there was a commonly used one, and I used it in my filter at the very bottom. It says, which is one of the most commonly used materials in the filtration process? Is it sand? Is it wood? Is it glass? Or is it rubber? So one more time, which is the most commonly used material in the filtration process? From what I showed you today, I know some of you were asking about other filters, and there's no sand involved with our reverse osmosis filters. So this has to do with what I showed you today. Is it sand, wood, glass, or rubber? Couple more seconds to get a few of those last answers in. And our answer is sand. So with 62 of you deciding it was sand, hopefully you remember that from the filters that you made today. Here's our scoreboard. Moving on up, Agile Yak is still up there, followed by Lovely Bear, Red Leopard, Cute Bear, and Wonder Dog. All right, here's our fourth question. Which is the last step in the water treatment process after filtration? So in our process, we went through 4 different steps. So what is the last step in the process after filtration? How do we make sure that there's no bacteria or virus in that water? Is it flocculation? Is it coagulation? Is it disinfection? Or is it sedimentation? Again, which is the last step in the water treatment process after filtration? Is it red triangle flocculation, yellow circle coagulation, blue diamond disinfection, or green square sedimentation? Couple more seconds. I see those answers coming on in. I know there's some classes doing this, so they're probably taking a vote. That's right. So many of you guessed disinfection. So the last step is to make sure that water is disinfected to keep any harmful bacteria or virus out of the pipes and distribution system that come out to you, to make sure you have safe drinking water. Here's our scoreboard moving, changing it up a bit, but we still have Agile Yak up there. All right, this is our last question. This is our very last question here. How many steps did we learn about in the water treatment process today? Did we learn about 1 step? Did we learn about 2 steps? Did we learn about 3 or 4? How many steps did we see in the entire water treatment process today? So you see some pictures there to help guide you. Let's try that question one more time. How many steps did we learn about in the water treatment process today? Remember, we talked about coagulation and flocculation, which were 1 step. Talked about sedimentation and filtration and disinfection. So I see those answers coming in. We have a couple more seconds. Was it red triangle 1? 2 was blue diamond. 3, yellow circle. Or 4, green square. And how many steps was it? Yay! 69 of you answered correctly. We learned about 4 different steps in that water treatment process today. Now, this could vary among different types of treatment centers or treatment plants as well, but this is what we learned about today. Well, awesome job participating in our Kahoot today. I'm going to go ahead and ask Mr. Bruder if there's one more chance for questions here.
Hey, Mrs. Bystrak. Yeah, we have one more question from Sadie asking, what kind of bacteria are you referring to as far as the things that we would need to filter out?
What kind of bacteria? So there's all kinds of different bacteria. It could either be from different organic materials, probably too many to name. And I don't know off the top of my head right now, but we just do really want to make sure. I mean, think of all the bacteria that could be found in runoff, just bacteria that is either from animals or from different kinds of runoff that comes from our community. So many different kinds, not just one, but we want to make sure that we can clean and treat it.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome. All right, I'm going to pull back into this PowerPoint here to go back and revisit our essential questions. So we were asking about how we can clean water and what materials are the most effective when building a water filter. So you hopefully are able to answer those in your head, or you're putting those down in the Q&A right now. How did we clean that water today? Even though there's many different types of process that can go through, we just want to make sure at the end we have clean, safe, reliable drinking water. And then as you're exploring making different types of water filters or remaking your filter, trying different materials, think about what materials are most effective when you were building that filter. Now, if you enjoyed today's live event, I invite you all to join our YouTube channel. We have some different live events that have been recorded. So I invite you to join our YouTube channel, which is CVESD Innovation and Instruction. if you want to go back and see these videos. This will also be archived there so you can remake your filter and follow along if you didn't have the materials today. Now next week, I want you to join my friend Mr. Coach. I want you to join our friend Coach Ramirez next week. He is from our health station. He will be doing a live event called Faster, Higher, Stronger Challenge. So he will be challenging you next week with some health and fitness activities. Again, join Mr. Ramirez next week with his Faster, Higher, Stronger Challenge. And with that, I would love to thank all of you for your participation this afternoon. I hope you're cleaning that water, checking out your filter. Mine, and I look on the side, it's still working, it's still cleaning that water. I'm seeing a big difference from the start to what it looks like now. So I hope you enjoyed your day. I hope you enjoy your weekend, and I hope to see you. I hope Coach Ramirez sees you next week as well.